What's going on, guys? It's Tech with Ray. Today I have for you the modding of the Bauer 2 that I purchased from the Mech Market subreddit. I have never been a fan of getting used stuff because I don't know what it's been through, but with these boards it's hard to find new ones, as the only way to do so is to get in the group buy stage. I also hate paying for something and having to wait forever to get it, so that wasn't really an option I considered. I gotta say, buying boards from the Mech Market was a bit scary at first, but honestly, this community is so nice and genuine that I ended up buying a lot more boards from here, which I will show in my future videos, so make sure to be subscribed to see those. On top of that, the guy who was selling this one had a pretty nice deal. I paid $930 and that included the case and 2 builds and shipping. And considering the fact that this board without switches retails for $750, I thought it was a pretty good deal. The first build was the one that you're seeing now, which is the Gateron Black inks on an aluminum plate, and the other is a Cherry MX Black on a polycarbonate plate. The case had a little bit of patina, which is that dark color on the brass you're seeing, which is very common on the brass material. Other than that, I think the board was in great condition. Upon receiving the board, I was actually very disappointed with how it sounded. And I think you all can agree with this sound test. The rattle on the spacebar was so brutal that I didn't really use this board on a daily basis, as I had other cheaper boards that had better sound than this. My options for fixing this was to either order a new PCB, plate, switches, and stabs, or desolder the switches already on the PCB, changing/relubing the switches and relubing the stabs, which is the way I decided to go. I already had this desoldering gun, so I knew the process wasn't going to be as horrible as if I did it manually. For those of you that don't know the normal process, you basically have to use your soldering tool to heat up the old solder to the perfect temperature so you can then suck the solder with a suction tool and hope you got it all out. If not, you would have to add more solder and repeat the process until it was a clean suction. This process is definitely not fun. So I would recommend investing in this desoldering gun, which retails for $250 at the time of filming this, if you plan on indulging in this hobby. Anyhow, the process to fix this was to disassemble the board, desolder all the switches, remove the old lube from the stabs, and I could have either relubed the switches, which would require me to remove the old lube from each switch and applying new lube. But if you've ever tried to lube a switch, you know how time consuming it is. So instead, I decided to get pre-lube switches from the Mech Market. This whole process took me around 2 hours to complete. The most time consuming part was desoldering and soldering again. And if I had to relube the old switches, that would have taken me another 2 hours easily. Honestly though, this desoldering gun made the whole process quite fun and fast. I had a little bit of issues with the solder not wanting to come out as clean as the others, but this was insignificant. Pulling out all the switches from the plate was also a bit difficult, and some switches got their casing a little messed up from this process, so I recommend if you're trying to reuse these switches to have a backup, as they can get damaged from this process. As you can see, the previous owner had done the tape mod, so I had to replace with new tape. Since my main goal was to fix the rattling from the spacebar, I really had to make sure this was done properly. The main thing that actually causes the rattle is the lack of lube within the stabs. In order to fix this, I had to clean the old lube off and reapply new lube. There is a better way to remove the lube, but for my case, I just cleaned it off with a napkin. The best lube to use for switches and stabilizers is Krytox 205 Grade 0. Some people recommend using dielectric grease, but I really don't agree with that. I also recommend using a thin brush, obviously, in order to get the lube really in there. You can also use a stem holder to avoid touching the stem, and getting the lube on you, as you can see that I'm using. This is really overkill and takes more time, but it will produce a better outcome. Remember, apart from lubing the actual switch, I would argue this is more important, as having rattle on any of your stabs can be the worst. This part roughly took me 20 minutes, so it really wasn't that bad. I highly recommend testing out your stabs before you begin the soldering, because if there is a mistake in this part, it would require to desolder the whole board again to get to your stabs. You can test, like I show here, how the stab will sound without having to solder. So I recommend doing this, just to be safe. If this is your first time soldering and you aren't sure if the PCB is fully functional, you can grab a pair of tweezers and place them on the part where you have to solder the switch and verify the key was pressed on your computer using softwares like VIA. I skipped this part because I forgot, but if something had gone wrong with the desoldering, I wouldn't have known until it was too late. My tips for soldering is to make sure all the switches are fully pressed in and that there are no gaps within the plate, the switch, and the PCB. Once you have verified that, begin to solder the corner switches to make sure everything is evenly pressed. Once the corner switches are done, you can go around the edges and finish with the center ones. It is also very important that if you're doing this indoors to have good air circulation and try to open the windows if possible, as the fumes are not good for the body. I bought this little fan from Amazon, and behind me I had a Dyson that was telling me the air quality in my room was horrible. So I would recommend opening up a window and leaving the area as soon as you're done. My favorite switches so far have been the tangerines and the alpacas. So I wanted a similar sound to that, which would be the Prevail switches based on my research. And I have to say, I'm very happy with my choice. And then it was time to see if all this work paid off with the final sound test. I have to say, I am really happy with how it came out. I have been putting off fixing this board to be able to make this video, and now I cannot wait to daily drive this. So make sure to leave a like if you've enjoyed this video. As always, thanks for watching. Tech with Ray out.